Hey guys, and welcome back to today's video. In this tutorial I'll show you how to sew an invisible zipper, but with a professional trick I learned during my tailoring apprenticeship. I'll start by demonstrating the common method most people use and then introduce my technique, which results in a perfectly squared top edge and a much cleaner inside finish. First, let's take a look at the materials. We have two rectangular fabric pieces reinforced at the center back with fusible tape. We have two facing pieces and one invisible zipper. Just a quick side note, the zipper I'm using is over 20 years old, so the teeth don't bend back as easily anymore. This means it won't look as perfectly invisible as it should. Don't worry, you'll see the correct result in the improved method later. So let's start with the common method. First, we need to position the zipper. To figure out how to place the zipper, lay everything out as it should look when finished. Fold the seam allowance on one side and place it against the zipper. This helps visualize which side goes where. Now mark the stitch line on the fabric using tailor's chalk or vanishing chalk, and also the zipper stop where it should end. Typically, the stop should be 2 to 3 millimeters plus the seam allowance away from the fabric edge. Pin one side of the zipper in place, aligning it with your markings, then stitch it using either a half presser foot like I do or an invisible zipper foot, gently pressing the teeth away as you sew. Because of my old zipper, it won't be perfectly invisible, but you'll see the technique in action. Repeat the same steps for the other side. Close the zipper to check the alignment, then press the seam from the right side. Now you need to finish the top edge. So let's start by attaching the facing. Open the zipper and pin one facing piece along the top edge. Stitch it in place with a 1 cm seam allowance. Repeat on the other side, then press the seam allowance towards the facing. You can also understitch here if you like. Next, fold the fabric right sides together and sew the center back of the facing. To keep the seam aligned, sew from the outer fabric side about 5 millimeters away from the previous stitch line. This way you are still stitching onto the zipper tape. Trim the seam allowance at the corners, turn the facing right sides out and push out the edges neatly. Finally, close the remaining center back seam, aligning it with the zipper stitching for a smooth transition. Press the seam open. And that's the standard method. The result is fine, but often the top edge curves slightly and the inside finish at the center back isn't as clean. Now let's go over my preferred method for a cleaner and more precise finish. One variation is that you can first close the lower portion of the center back seam before installing the zipper. This is especially helpful when sewing with a half presser foot like I do instead of an invisible zipper foot, but it's not the key difference in this method. You can also leave the lower seam open and close it at the end. Mark the center back seam line and also the stopper part at the top and do that for both sides. This time I am using a new invisible zipper that works fine, so yeah, let's pin that at one side at the center back. At the center back seam, which we have already closed, we pin the zipper inside the seam allowance to keep it in place. Then, just like before, pin and sew the zipper in place, pressing the teeth away as you stitch. If you pre-sewed the lower back seam, taper the stitch line at the zipper bottom edge into the seam allowance. The key difference, attaching the facing. Here's where the magic happens. Flip the fabric so you are looking at the back side of the rectangle. Now shift the facing outward by 1 cm at the top edge. This might look odd at first, but it will make sense soon. The lower edge of the facing can gradually return to the original seam line. This is especially important if you're also attaching a lining. Now mark a stitching line 5 mm away from the zipper seam and sew along this marked line. Now fold the seam allowance towards the facing using the zipper teeth as the fold line. It's important to flatten the facing completely before pinning. This is the crucial step for achieving a clean edge. In the video you'll see how I adjust everything to make sure the edges match up properly. Since we previously offset the facing by 1 cm, everything now aligns perfectly when folded. Essentially, we are treating the zipper as a part of the facing structure itself. Once both sides are sewn, trim the seam allowance at the corners, turn everything right side out. To get a perfectly square corner, I like to pre-fold the seam allowance into the shape before flipping it, holding it in place with my thumbnail. Press everything flat and that's it. With this method you get a sharp square top edge and a cleaner inside finish. You'll notice that about 5 mm of the zipper tape is now incorporated into the facing, making everything lie much flatter. I love using this method and I've seen it multiple times before in different ateliers, so try it out and let me know what you think. That's it. It was a very short and quick video on how to do the zipper method. But yeah, I hope this helped. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!